Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. Season 3, Episode 26, 4 Idiots Discuss Sports. Took a little doing. The schedules were not always aligning, so this is probably a week or two overdue. Dan Snyder sells the Washington Commanders. As a native of the DMV and one who understands the significance of this event, I have on my 3 compatriots to discuss the impact of the sale, the underlying circumstances, and the future of one Washington football team, whatever the name may be. Thank you to all of my loyal listeners. I do appreciate it. Truly. Please like, subscribe, thumbs up, whatever else is now in vogue to promote a podcast. This Is Why I Don't Vote podcast is on Patreon. If you enjoy, please consider supporting.
Act 1, 4 Idiots Discuss Sports. Dan Snyder sells the Washington football team.
After only 1 year where I pledged that if one Danny Boy Snyder sold the team, I would have another 4 Idiots Discuss Sports podcast. Here we are. Danny Boy is selling the team. Backed by, I'll say popular demand, but it's really not that popular. I've got Doc, I've got JB, and I've got Brian. 4 Idiots Discuss Sports. JB, as a lifelong Deadskins fan, I don't even know what to call him, because I'm sure the name is going to change a couple more times in the next few years. How do you feel knowing that abusive, alcoholic, demented, you could even maybe masochistic marriage that you were in is over?
Well, so it's weird. First of all, it feels a little anticlimactic. I feel like in March of 22, the inaugural 4 Idiots Talk About Sports, specifically about the Dannny, was when we were like pressed up against it. We're like, hey, this guy sucks. This is really bad for America. And now it's happened. But I feel like we were expecting it to happen. So first of all, I'm glad he's out. I feel like we're moving into a better space. I'm not fired up otherwise. One of the things that I do want to touch on when we get into the back half of our conversation is Josh Harris. He seems like a good dude. He seems like he's probably a good owner. But he also was, if not the author, a co-signer of the process.
Yes.
So I'm kind of like, I'm happy that Danny's out. But I feel like we've got a long way to go, kids.
Doc, how are you feeling?
I agree. I think we've got a long way to go, but it's wonderful to have something to talk about other than Dan Snyder. I mean, a sense of how far the team had fallen is that more people knew Dan Snyder than the name of the starting quarterback. More people knew the name of Dan Snyder than half the people who were on the defensive front line. And for fans of the team that I'll refer to as the Commodes, I spent more time talking about ownership troubles than fielding a competitive team. So I'm excited to have something to be excited about. Josh Harris has welcomed the fans back to training camp. People are showing up in mass. It's like Jack Kent Cook is the owner of the team again. And you've got a sense of hope and optimism on the horizon. Now, the team still doesn't have a functional quarterback, and you don't know what they're going to be like on the field. I hope they don't wear those all-black uniforms again, which look more like the Steelers than the Commodes. But nonetheless, it's nice to have hope on the horizon.
Well, JB mentioned something. I think that it's a good segue because there's this attitude now that Snyder has sold the team that it was quote-unquote inevitable. And in my mind, I don't think that it was inevitable. but for the fact, and this is something that one Brian Hoff and I have touched on in other podcasts that we've done specific to baseball, but we just can't help but bring it up, that Dan could do practically anything that he wanted. Practically anything. The one unforgivable sin wasn't stealing money from the state of Virginia, which he did. Wasn't stealing money from the federal government, which he did. It was stealing money from his fellow owners. And for that, there was no coming back. And but for that, at least in my mind, I don't know that we're sitting here having this podcast. I don't know that Dan isn't keeping those, that skeleton style clutch on that team and still fighting tooth and nail to get himself a new stadium deal so he could get back into good graces. So that leads me to this. What do you, the three of you, we'll address this in turn. What do you feel about this theory that Snyder leaked those emails for John Gruden to get sideways with Roger Goodell, right? They already were at odds with one another. That's pretty well known. But that Snyder did it on purpose to get back into the good graces of the front office, and it ends up blowing up in his face such that all of those strings of yarn end up turning that massive ball into a little piece of rubber, and at the at the end of it, that little piece of rubber is the backstop, as Hoff put it. The Hoff, what was your term of art for his second set of books?
Dan Snyder scrolls.
That little piece of rubber was the doorstop to the lair for Dan Snyder scrolls. So I'm sure you've read about this. I'm sure you've got opinions on it. That Danny Boy ends up sinking his own ship in an effort to save himself. Doc, you start.
I guess my question is, are we looking at this the wrong way? He bought the team for $750 million, and he sold it for $6 billion. So it doesn't quite make sense to me that he was trying to get back on the good graces. Maybe he saw a way to pocket $5 billion and ride off into the sunset. And the whole thing that I keep struggling to wrap my brain around is he's generally regarded as one of the worst owners in the National Football League. He ran the team into the ground. He alienated the fan base. And what did he get in return for doing such a horrible, shit-tastic job? $5 billion profit. Only in America.
I would like to speak to this very quickly. It harkens me back to one of the 30 for 30s, and JB, you may correct me on this, but it was a documentary about the two guys who tried to buy an NBA team, and they were unsuccessful in doing so. I believe they were one of the ownership groups in the ABA that didn't get to transfer their team over to the NBA. The league had this contract with them that they were supposed to pay these guys like a royalty.
I'm with you. Keep going.
So they ended up having to pay these guys hundreds of millions of dollars. And everyone was saying, oh, it was a good business deal. And the two guys were like, no, we wanted to own a team. The money is insignificant in comparison to owning the asset. So in light of that, Doc, do you think that there's something to, I mean, if a guy has $1 billion and he turns it into $5 billion, has he really netted anything? His lifestyle doesn't really change at all. He loses the asset. He loses the cachet. He loses the ability to go to the Rich Boys Club, which is the NFL's owners meeting every year, and rub elbows with the elite and rub their face in the fact that his team was more successful than theirs, right? I mean, what do you think about that, looking at it from that lens?
I had the opportunity to be around many folks who have resources beyond my wildest dreams. And many of them would like nothing more than to have the ability to take those resources and travel around the world on a yacht and not have to worry about their troubles anymore. He has the ability now to travel around the world and not worry about his troubles anymore. He's got it made.
Mackley, if I may pop in here,
Doc, I agree with you, but let's be honest. Dannny had the ability to ride around on a yacht and not worry about anything for decades.
Yes.
And he didn't care. Danny Boy wanted the Redskins. I mean, that was his lifelong dream, was to own the Redskins. I think that, yes, he had a $5 billion coup here, but I think he really lost the opportunity and the pleasure of being in that Rich Boys Club. I think that's where his head was. I mean, that is the elite of the elites. 32 owners in the world own NFL teams. That is the elite of the elite. He had the opportunity to do this, to go around the world for decades. So that's nothing new. I think he's really lost that ability to be inside of the big boys club. I think, and JV, I was surprised when the entire team was sold. I truly had the feeling that when he first hired this investment bank, and I can't recall who it was, when he first hired this investment bank to find potential suitors out there, I thought it was going to be a partial sale. I thought that there was something that was going to be sold, but just enough that he could cover his debt so he could then try to build a new stadium and make more money. Now, again, it all comes down to the Dan Snyder scrolls, where he cooked the books on everything. But I think in his end result, he really wanted to keep the team all in, whether it was a majority stake, whether it was 100%. I don't think it was going to be 100%, but I did not expect him to relinquish full control out of this thing. And maybe, Doc, to your point, maybe it was that final $6 billion number that did it. But I was surprised that he let go of the reins at all.
JB, your thoughts?
Well, first, my thoughts are, I feel like there should be an illicit video that is similar to when Charlie goes in at the beginning of Wall Street and he understands that the books are cooked. I feel like that there should be one of those for Dannny, kind of a Wall Street circumstance.
Listen, something tells me Danny's got videos out there. I don't know if there are books to cook. Cooks are books, videos, but something tells me there's videos.
The thing for me is, first of all, again, glad it's over. You realize how bad the Redskins / Commanders have been since 1992?
Detroit Lions bad.
We won the Super Bowl in 1992. After 1992 and prior to Dannny, the Redskins record is 39-56-1. That's before Dannny took over ownership.
Right.
And what's the other thing? Oh, this is fun. Since we won the Super Bowl, every team in the league has had one 11-win season, except for the Redskins.
That's amazing, because I do recall that the Detroit Lions had their 11-win season during that stretch with Barry, and then they had another one.
You know what, Patrick? I actually wrote in parentheses, even the line.
Which is great. All right, to that end, though, and in light of all of that, I do want to bring it back to this idea that Dannny was trying to curry favor with the front office, with Roger Goodell in particular, by giving him the John Gruden emails when there was over 600,000 other emails in this cache. There's no way you could have had any one individual, what's the word I'm looking for, randomly or haphazardly or even coincidentally leaked in the way that it was, that touched on the through line of one person, right? It had to be intentional. And the idea being, I'll give these to Goodell. He hates Gruden anyway. It'll get him kicked out of the league, as I have done for at least 15 years with the petty politics that is being an NFL owner. This will win me over at least a little breathing room to get the money that I need for the stadium. So I'm going to start with you, Brian. What do you think about this theory?
I think it is. I think it's 100% valid. I think that as you look at it through the what would you say 600,000 emails, something along those lines, over that time frame, how is it that just these emails got released and leaked about John Gruden? So yes, it could have been to try to get him back in favor with Goodell after the Dan Snyder scrolls, but I don't know if that was completely going to be it. I think he legitimately thought, again, one man's opinion, I don't know Danny's thoughts, but, could it have been just a ploy to try to get take somebody's eye off the ball, right? Redirect attention away from the Cook books to now John Gruden and his racially insensitive emails. But I 100% agree with you that they were leaked on purpose and linked by the directive of one Danny Boy Snyder.
JB, what are your thoughts there?
In terms of the leaking of things?
Yeah, and intent.
Yeah, man. I mean, it seems as if he's kind of doing Mission Impossible, but minus the stunts. He seems to be like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. This seems like it's going to work, right? No, it's not going to work. You're saying stupid things, and you are surmising the stupidity of people that are out there in the world.
I see what you're saying, and he's playing checkers, and he thinks he's playing chess, and he might not even be playing checkers. He might be playing Connect Four.
I think it's some version of Candy Crush he's been playing. I don't know.
Doc, what do you think?
Pretty sneaky, sis.
To the ladders. It could be Candyland. That's a childish game. That's easy to understand. Loved by everyone.
Are you of the opinion that this was somewhat intentional, whether or not it would be to misdirect or if it was to curry favor?
I would go with curry favor, although I think there's a part of me. And by the way, slight segue. During the Tom Brady Deflategate thing, I really, truly wish he would have retired and then stood up at a podium and said, in a really circumspect manner, pointed at Goodell and said, fuck that guy, I'm out.
Yes.
So, I feel the same way about what's happening with the Dannny. I feel like you wanted to say, fuck those people, I'm out. But there's so much money involved.
Yeah, let's talk about that. It's probably a good segue into what Doc was mentioning earlier. One of the most laughable finds that I've ever seen in professional sports being that on his way out, Snyder had to quote-unquote agree in writing. I mean, if you go back and you look at these stories over and over again, it's almost like that they were trying to convince us of the severity of the punishment such that Danny Boy had to agree to it in writing, that he's going to pay a $60 million fine on his way out after being given a boatload of money in $6 billion. Is this just further a testimony to the fact that the league is completely transparent in its hypocrisy and that this is really, Trump said it best, whether or not you agree with the context in which he said it, it's not locker room talk, it's locker room behavior, right? The NFL condemns all the time, quote unquote, locker room behavior by the players, and yet you see it more and more and more, not only between the owners, but in the front office itself. Brian, your thoughts?
We're going back to the leak, right? The email leak.
The email leak, the potential motives behind it, how owner X, which I believe is Dan Snyder, surmised, as JB so eloquently put it, that it would be used once it was given to people in the front office, namely Goodell, and that his estimation of how low, how locker room behavior the NFL front office was, basically indicted everyone.
Yeah, Snyder was going down in some way, shape, or form. And as many that are in that situation, it's fight or flight, right? You get into this mode of, if I'm going down, I'm trying to take down everyone with me. Or if I can try to take somebody else down, maybe I won't go down as hard. And I think it gets down to this narcissistic realm that he lives in of, maybe I'm not quite as bad as everybody thinks I am. When in fact it's all but true. And if we try to move the coconuts around a little bit too much, try to take the eye off the ball, then maybe he's going to come out clean on this thing. But Dannny never came out clean. He never came out clean in anything. There was always if you want to think about locker room attitude or boys club. I mean, that's the world he played in on a daily basis. It's the world he played in before he bought the Redskins. It's the world he played in while he bought the Redskins. It's probably the same world that he's playing in today. But if he could do anything to try to, take the attention off of him, blame somebody else, try to get somebody else in the limelight as opposed to him, maybe he can come out at least a little bit squeaky clean. But I just don't think that was ever in the cards. Here's the good news: is Dannny got his $5 billion. And more importantly, the Deadskins, Washington racial slurs, whatever you want to call them, have some sort of light at the end of the tunnel. That's the good news. But, Danny Boy Snyder, I think everything was contrived with him. I think in one way, shape, or form, he was trying to hide things, trying to misdirect. The Dan Snyder scrolls were evidence of that in some way, shape, or form. And I don't think that there was ever going to be a way for the Washington Commanders, Commodes, Deadskins, whatever they might be, to come out on top while he was still at the helm. And the good news now they got a shot. # trust the process.
Oh, yeah. That's an excellent segue. And so I'll let JB go off on this. The new owner, and for anyone who's still listening who does not understand trust the process, the new owner was at least, if not the architect, he was one of the engineers who signed off on the architecture of the destruction of a team and basically playing to lose in order to get draft picks such that they could build through the draft. And as of yet, that did not net the team to be named a championship, that team being the Philadelphia 76ers. How do you feel about this person coming in and taking over the helm of the team in the short term and in the long term?
So, short term, super psyched about it. He's local. You know what? So is Dannny. So, do with that what you will. Josh Harris is local. He's a Montgomery County guy. He went to a very touted, I guess, sleepaway school in D.C. He's a Harvard guy, and I don't actually hate what he did with Sam Hinkie and the Sixers. But what I will say that it does is allow losing to be part of your culture. And the NFL is different, though. It's so many more people. It's so many more players. So I think we can probably get away from that just based on the whole scalability, I guess. But I think he's going to be okay. And he did a thing where the day that they took over, he called into a local sports radio thing and bought a bunch of people a bunch of beers. And the next day, Magic did a thing on the Today Show. And so I think they're putting their best feet forward. But I also think it's something you just have to watch. I mean, we've been so bad for so long, Patrick.
So on the buy beers, I will buy a 6-pack of Cold Mountain to anyone on this call who can name 10 starters on the Washington football team's roster.
I cannot.
I don't know if anyone could name a backup quarterback.
Well, the backup quarterback is Jacoby Brissett.
Oh, there you go. You're halfway there.
Montez Sweat and John Allen got into a fight on the sidelines. There's 2 defensive linemen.
But that's my point. The team is so bad that even lifelong fans can't tell you who's starting. And when your starting quarterback is Sam Howell and your backup quarterback is Jacoby Brissett, you're not going to be any good. So all you can hope is that you are bad in a year when there's a savior quarterback, because you can't run the process in the NFL. You got too many players unless you've got a quarterback coming out that's a difference maker. And the Redskins were good when they had quarterbacks. It's a quarterback-driven league, and until we get a quarterback, they're not going to be any good.
Doc, I agree with you completely. I think that's the one key to this entire thing, right, is in order to be good in the NFL and in college, in football in general, generally speaking, you have to have a really good quarterback. And it's something they haven't had for quite a while. So let's hope that can happen. You know, you look at the roster, and it's been a shambles. They've been trying to put together a roster for decades. They've been trying to put together a coaching staff for decades, right? Norv Turner was fired 13 weeks after Danny Boy said that he was going to be the head coach for quote unquote a long time. A long time is 13 weeks. So the only hope that you have is some sort of stability across the board. You know, shoot, man, I was last fall, your defensive coordinator is a guy by the name of Jack Del Rio. On a Friday night before a Sunday game, I saw Jack Del Rio slugging beers at the local club. So, you know, you got to have some sort of continuity with it. But here's what I also think needs to be addressed is, you know, let's talk about Josh Harris for a second. You know, Josh Harris, obviously owner of the 76ers, co-founded, co-authored Trust the Process. Josh Harris, as jovial as he may be with buying a round of beers with folks, he's a very, 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 very shrewd businessman. Josh Harris also founded a company called Apollo Global Management. It's a hedge fund. It's a private equity firm. I actually worked for a company that was, dare I say, seed money dotted line to Apollo. And I can tell you by secondhand, they're tough to do business with. Now, they've got they've got the money, obviously, to do anything that they can within reason and salary caps with the Washington Commanders, Redskins, whatever they're going to change the name to. But, you know, as jovial and as free-spirited as they may seem on the Today Show and, you know, in training camp, I think, make no bones about it, I think they are going to be unbelievably shrewd through the process. Hashtag trust the process.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. That leads me to the next question that I had for the group. So you can look at it one of two ways, that it's fortuitous. The other way is, you know, it's temporary. Riverboat Ron, right? It's fortuitous that Riverboat Ron is there. He's the closest thing to stability that the team has had for the past few seasons. And because there's no expectation that they're going to be successful in the near term, you can keep he and his staff there, and you can develop a roster for the next coach? Or is it, hey, this is a dead man walking, and I use that tongue-in-cheek because he was somewhat of a dead man walking, and then he beats cancer, so give him credit for that. Is he a dead man walking within the halls of Washington Park because it's only a matter of time before the new ownership brings in their people, not only a new GM, but a new coach?
If I may, I think, well, again, one man's opinion. Not a fan, just one man's opinion. I think that you've got to give Riverboat Ron a chance. I think it gets back to the point of stability. I think he is a good coach. I think he's had pretty shitty ownership, and with that instability. So get the new guys in. I think you give him a shot. Is he a dead man walking? I don't know. I don't think they're going to get rid of him after a year unless they completely crap the bed. But I think he's the best guy for the job right now. The question is, do they think the same thing? JB?
Oh, no, I think Ron's dog shit.
There you have it.
Tell us how you really feel.
He's had 3 years to lord over this team. Also, I think Mark Mayhew is a bad general manager. So what I think is going to be interesting for the team is for Harris and, to a lesser extent, Magic. There's a lot to be done with the front office because we can't pick players.
That's a good point. So one of the things that it came to me right before we were going to do this podcast, and I knew we were going to get to the point where this team is terrible, who knows what the future holds. Is there a glimmer of hope, though, that because the rest of the division outside of Philadelphia has had so many ups and downs, that this team on the field may not look so bad by comparison? It's an easy segue to say, what's the rest of the NFC East going to be like? And is that going to make Washington look better or worse? I'm going to start with you, JB, because I know you got some hatred for the other teams in the division. What do you think?
What I think is Jalen Hurts is a freaking genius. And we all missed on Jalen Hurts.
I think anyone who lives in the DMV and likes the Cowboys should move. But once you get that out of the way, it's the Giants and the Eagles and the Deadskins. I can't speak to the Cowboys because I've hated them since 1971. The Eagles
You were 3
away from being just as bad as everyone else.
So you're saying that he could not have developed such hatred at 3 years old, JB?
Oh, yes, you can.
I think in 1971, probably not as hateful of the Cowboys as they should have been, but he was probably also super into the Baltimore Colts, which still existed then.
That's a fair point. Brian, speak to the NFC East and what this will do to the luster or the shine of the Washington football team, whether or not they can look somewhat competent in light of what is opposing them on the field in that division.
Well, it's all going to depend, as JD mentioned. They got front office issues that they need to figure out, and I think that you got to do that first, and then you address coaching staff. Right? You're not going to fire coaching staff with existing GMs. You're going to bring in a GM, let them evaluate and bring in their own coach. Right? That's where it's going to be. I'm going to bring in my own guy. So I think this year is going to be a challenge because the players on the field ain't changed, and the coaching staff ain't changed. I still think it's going to be tough. The Phillies, pardon me, cheesy peasy, I'm in baseball season. The Eagles are going to be, still the class of the division. I mean, the question with the Giants is Daniel Jones, are his web feet going to continue to take him forward, right? Is he going to progress again? Listen, my wife's a Cowboys fan, which makes me a Cowboys fan. Hey, listen, it is what it is. We got, happy wife, happy life. That's throwing bad interceptions in practice. Practice, not a game, practice. And he's got to show something, right? They're getting to the end of the run with what they can pay. They've given some extensions right now. They've got their starting guard and all pro Zach Martin holding out right now at $25,000 or $50,000 a day. I don't know what the number is. I don't think this year it affects the Redskins at all. I think if anything, they stay at the same record as last year, if not regress a little bit, because I think the rest of the division could get better. I haven't looked at the schedule. I don't know I don't know, hard schedule, soft schedule. I don't know the answer to that one, but I don't know that the NFC East is going to help the Washington Football Club this year. I think it is going to be trying to find a new identity as an organization and a new culture as an organization. Wins and losses be damned.
Okay, well, let me slightly alter the question, specifically to Doc, specifically to JB. In light of the change in ownership, are you watching any more Washington football team football this season than you would have had nothing changed?
No.
That's pretty emphatic. Doc, what do you think?
I think I'll watch about the same amount. I'm interested to see what they do. It's a spectacle of something new. And I'm going to hold out hope that there's brighter futures on the horizons for DMV fans. The Baltimore Orioles are the second best team in baseball. The Washington Wizards/Bullets have a new general manager. Hope's on the horizon. And if the Commodes could get a real name and change their logo to something meaningful, that in and of itself is positive. So I have not bought any Commodes gear. I'm going to hold out hope for a new name. And as I hold out hope for a new name, I'm holding out hope for a new season. As I said, the Eagles are an injury away. Dallas can't get out of their way. They've not been as good, and as long as the Redskins have been bad. So there's always hope when a new season's on the horizon.
And Knackley, if I can address that as well, I think Doc's word of hope is what is going to give the average Commodes, Commanders, Washington football team fan in the greater DMV. I think it is going to give them more reason to watch. I think it's new ownership, at least for the first quarter of the season, right? Give me 4 games. Give me 4 games of hope before I get kicked in the teeth. So we'll see what happens in those 4 games. Is it enough to change the culture and the attitude of the organization? Could be. But I think that for the average fan, it's enough to turn television on a little bit more often.
Well, I will say this. And I believe, Brian, it may have been you or JB that made the comment earlier. The peoples are coming now to those spring training, the spring practices, right? Or the summer practices. So the interest, whether or not the team is any better, which I think we all agree it's not, the interest now is back just for the promise that because the guy that was suffocating the team for the last 20 years is gone, at least everybody can take a breath of fresh air. Well, I appreciate all 3 of you. I know the logistics weren't easy, so I do appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast. And I don't know that we'll be doing it again soon unless, what am I going to throw out? Okay, we'll do it again when Washington wins a playoff game. Mark it on your calendars. Washington not just goes to the playoffs, they win a playoff game. We're going to have to do another 4 Idiots Discuss Sports.
I'm in. Probably before the Cowboys win another one.
Hail to the Commodes. Hail victory. Braves on the warpath. Fight for old DC.
The king is dead. Long live the king.
And also, long live the greatest in the history of the world, Chipper.
Yeah.
Amen, brother.
R.I.P. Chipper. Thank you, gentlemen.
Act 2 Epilogue.
One of the logistical constraints was that one Brian Hoff, who graciously came on to do this podcast, lost one of his best friends, his dog Chipper, unexpectedly, and that delayed our recording of this episode of Four Idiots Discuss Sports by at least a week. Condolences to Brian and his family. I know they love the dog. I know the circumstance came out of left field for them, so I do appreciate Brian coming on and doing the podcast. And as difficult as it is to corral 4 different people in 2 different time zones with careers and families, I will endeavor to have more episodes of Four Idiots Discuss Sports, broadening the horizons of this very podcast. This is Why Don't Vote, a podcast.